Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Aiboan, and I would like to welcome you to the inaugural session of the dialogue on 25 years of BIMSTEC in enhancing BIMSTEC connectivity in the new era. This event, running in parallel with the 5th BIMSTEC Summit, is organized by the Lakshman Khadirgam Institute of International Relations and Strategic Studies in collaboration with the South Asian Network on Economic Modeling, with support from the United States Agency for International Development. This dialogue will focus on a diverse set of issues pertaining to cross-border cooperation in the areas of trade, investment, infrastructure, multimodal connectivity, digital economy, and people-to-people contact. The dialogue will generate an evidence-based discussion with the goal of advancing scholarly exchange across the countries in the Bay of Bengal region. Now, may I invite the following distinguished members of the inaugural session to come up to the stage. Honorable Professor G.L. Piris, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sri Lanka. Mr. Reed Aishliman, Mission Director, Sri Lanka and Maldives, United States Agency for International Development. Dr. D.L. Mendes, Executive Director, Lakshman Khadirgam Institute. The first speaker of this inaugural panel will be Dr. D.L. Mendes, Executive Director of the Lakshman Khadirgam Institute, and he will be delivering the welcome remarks. Dr. Dayantalaksari Mendes obtained his LLB from the University of Ceylon and was called to the bar in Sri Lanka. He obtained his MPhil from the University of Cambridge in the UK in International Relations. Later, he obtained a PhD from the Sri Venkateswara University, India. He was a research scholar at the Hague Academy at the Peace Palace in Den Haag, and also served as a visiting scholar for the Center for International Studies at Cambridge University, UK. Dr. Mendes also went on to serve as Sri Lanka's ambassador to Austria with accreditation to the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Croatia. He was also the permanent representative to the United Nations in Vienna, and he was also a member of UNIDO and the IAEA Board of Governors. Dr. D.L. Mendes, may I invite you to come up to the podium.
Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Professor Dr. G.L. Piris, MP, Excellencies, the Mission Director, USAID, Mr. Reed Aishliman, Excellencies, His Excellency Ambassador for Thailand, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasant duty to warmly welcome Honorable G.L. Piris, Distinguished Foreign Minister of Sri Lanka, to give the keynote address at this inauguration session. It is also my duty to welcome the Mission Director of USAID, Mr. Reed Aishliman, for supporting this seminar financially. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is also my duty to welcome the distinguished panelists and galaxy of experts who are participating at this seminar. All of them will be introduced individually at the time of their presentation. Lakshman Khadirgam Institute is happy to co-sponsor this seminar with South Asia Network for Economic Modeling, SANEM. The theme of the seminar is Enhancing BIMSTEC Connectivity in the New Era. BIMSTEC consists of 7 member states. It began with the Bangkok Declaration in 1997, with Bangladesh, India, Thailand, and Sri Lanka as founding members. states. Later, Bhutan, Myanmar, and Nepal joined the BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC today is home for 1.668 billion people, accounting to almost 22% of the world population. It has a combined GDP of US dollars 3.67 trillion. After 25 years, BIMSTEC, the BIMSTEC Charter was signed today by heads of state. It is a plurilateral treaty and provides a framework for the development of BIMSTEC as a regional economic organization in the Bay of Bengal. I must say the treaties are the bones and sinews of global politics. They move states from mere talk to solemn commitment, and they are moral fiber that binds states together under the 1967 Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties. In my view, the BIMSTEC Charter has three important pillars. The first pillar is that the major decisions are signed and ratified by heads of states or governments. The second pillar is that the meeting of ministers of varied sectors, there are 7 sectors identified so far. Under these sectors, ministers are empowered to make recommendations to heads of state in consultation with senior officials. The third pillar is the establishment of a fully fledged secretariat with immunities and privileges as accorded to international civil servant. The role of the secretariat is to implement the decision of the heads of state. They can take the form of treaties, non-treaty instruments, or model bills with a view to establishing closer connectivity in dealing with matters relating to regional cooperation. EU, CARICOM, ECOWAS, UNASUR follow this model. At the CARICOM, I was involved in drafting regional treaties and model bills for the implementation at the national level. It was a daunting task, and it gave me a good insight as to the working of regional corporations. However, BIMSTEC Charter does not have a termination or withdrawal clause, as found in the EU Charter. You know, the EU Charter has a very comprehensive termination clause, and you have probably know about Brexit and the implication it created in the European continent. The absence of such a clause was a controversial issue in the CARICOM Secretariat when I was legal counsel to the legal division. At the CARICOM Secretariat, the Bahamas was exploring to leave the Caribbean community if they were to accept free movement of persons without any restrictions. The Bahamas has a population of 400,000 people with per capita income of US dollars 35,000 per capita. Haiti, who is the neighbor, has 6 million people with a per capita income of US dollars 1,900. The Bahamas perceive that there is a problem of providing free movement of persons under the revised Treaty of Chaguenas, which is a charter which regulates the CARICOM trade and investment. The absence of this provision helped the CARICOM Secretariat. It's a good thing, in a way it did not have it. To resolve this problem, after lengthy discussions and negotiations, after a long time, they remain with the CARICOM Secretariat without allowing free flow of persons as provided in the original, the revised charter. So, not having it or having it is not a problem, I feel, because it can give flexibility to retain the membership of its members whenever there is a serious dispute. Having it will promote a withdrawal very hastily. So this is what I learned from empirically by working in this organization. It is also important to note that the provisions relating to settlement of disputes are a bit weak in the Charter. It may change with the passage of time. Under the Charter, it needs to be initiated by member states through dialogue, consultation, and negotiation to arrive at consensus. Most tribunal regional economic organizations have provided regional courts or an arbitration tribunal to settle legal problems. For example, the Caribbean Court of Justice, European Court of Justice, and ECOWAS Court of Justice, and many other regional organizations provide a court of law to resolve matters related to trade and investments disputes. In most of these regional organizations, individuals, not only states, and corporation can initiate proceedings in the regional court. These are trade and investment issues, and there should be at some point, not only states, even individuals who are dealing in business matters should be able to initiate any proceedings at the international level. Otherwise, the system was not going to operate effectively and efficiently. There was a huge case where I also wrote the written submissions, Trinidad Cement Company versus Guyana, where the question arose whether the particular provision in the Charter was not very clear, whether it was the state that should initiate proceedings or whether it could still be open for individual, which is the Trinidad Cement Company, to initiate action. The court, after a very lengthy 240-page judgment, conferred that even individuals can go to international court when there is a trade dispute of that nature. In welcoming all of you, I wish to say this seminar is of fundamental importance to provide a way forward in the new era. I also wish to say BIMSTEC has all the makings of a viable regional economic organization, and therefore the first step is to draft trade and investment promotion treaty for BIMSTEC countries. That's the first step, because that is the beginning of a strong regional organization, trade and investment agreement. That's how the CARICOM, ECOWAS started with the first steps. Then they began to deal with security, they began to deal with arrest warrant treaties, and so forth, and became more and more. There are about 90 treaties, intra-regional treaties now in most of these regional corporations. These changes can transform the Bay of Bengal to a tourist, economic and maritime hub in the same way as the Caribbean Sea and the Mediterranean Sea have contributed to the development of regional corporations, regional organizations. It is therefore a challenging task, I believe, for the member states to establish a platform after the Charter for closer connectivity among member states under the Charter. With these 2 words, opening welcome remarks, I now give the floor to the Honorable Professor Dr. D.J. Peiris for his inaugural or keynote address. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Dr. Laksire Mendes, Mission Director of USAID, Mrs. Sugandhi Kadirgama, officials of the Kadirgama Institute, Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Thailand, Professor Rohan Gunaratna, ladies and gentlemen. Now that the BIMSTEC summit has been concluded, I think it is appropriate to look back on the achievements of the last 3 days, to take stock of the current situation and to determine the trajectory for the future. Today we had the summit of BIMSTEC. His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa connected virtually with the heads of government of the 7 countries comprising BIMSTEC. Yesterday we had a physical meeting of the foreign ministers representing the 7 BIMSTEC countries, with the exception of the foreign minister of Myanmar, who joined us online. The day before that, that's on the 28th, we had the meeting of the foreign secretaries of the BIMSTEC countries. Today we signed the BIMSTEC Charter and several other significant agreements. I think to realize the importance of BIMSTEC, we need only to reflect on some of the current developments in the contemporary world. There can be no doubt whatsoever that the way forward, the solution to the problems that we confront today necessarily have to be evolved in a multilateral context. So multilateralism is the key to the future. This is all too evident. Look at COVID-19. It was not confined within national boundaries. COVID-19 traversed all national boundaries. Certainly all 7 BIMSTEC countries had to deal with it in different ways, with different degrees of success. But certainly it was a challenge that confronted all 7 countries. The current situation in Europe with regard to Ukraine also brings home to us that multilateralism is not optional. It is not something that we can look at and choose if we like and reject at will. That is not the case. That is necessarily imposed upon us. The Ukraine crisis has brought about a refugee problem of daunting proportions. About 3 million people have left the Ukraine. The typical pattern is that the father of the family stays behind, the mother and the children leave. Now, when the hostilities are over, whenever that would be, and it is our fervent hope that it would happen sooner rather than later, what happens then? It is exceedingly likely that the father would join the wife and the children rather than vice versa. Because with all the devastation that has taken place, it would not be feasible for families to return to the Ukraine. It has been calculated that the cost of handling the refugee problem with any degree of success will be in the region of $20 billion US. There has been a total disruption of supply chains, commodities. When the war started, we had 81 Sri Lankans in the Ukraine, some of whom were students. Today, there are 27. The 27 Sri Lankans staying behind in the Ukraine have married there, are employed there, and have decided not to leave Ukraine at present. Sri Lanka's embassy in Turkey, situated in Ankara, is looking after them. There is a dedicated diplomatic officer who is available 24 hours of the day on a hotline. We have other problems as well. There are difficulties about Sri Lankan Airlines flying into Moscow. It is not a political decision by the government of Sri Lanka. It has been imposed on us by circumstances relating to insurance. So we can't fly into Moscow. There's also a problem about spare parts. Boeing and Airbus are involved in these sanctions that have been imposed on Russia. So although we are physically far away in terms of geographical distance, the fallout is there very much for us. Probably the most significant manifestation of the fallout is the phenomenal rise in oil prices. So that is going to affect the cost of living, the viability of industries in the BIMSTEC countries, including Sri Lanka. So all of this underlines the reality that any kind of movement forward, any practical solution that we endeavor to evolve will, as I said, necessarily have to be of a multilateral nature. So this is why BIMSTEC is important. In a sense, in a very realistic sense, it is the throbbing heart of the world economy. Dr. Laksiri Mendis said that the BIMSTEC countries are home to 1.6 billion people. I would like to add that the Bay of Bengal is by far the largest bay in the world. You are talking of 2.6 million square kilometers of ocean resources. Now, at the summit that was concluded at about 11:45 this morning, in addition to the BIMSTEC Charter that was signed at the 5th BIMSTEC Summit held here in Colombo, we signed several other instruments of far-reaching importance. One of them was the Digital Transfer Facility Agreement. Digital Transfer Facility. This underlines the importance of connectivity. If you ask me to summarize in one word the pith and substance of BIMSTEC and the true nature of the achievement of the 5th BIMSTEC Summit, at which Sri Lanka handed over the chairmanship of BIMSTEC to the Kingdom of Thailand. If you ask me, what is the gravamen, the essence of the achievement, I would sum it up in one word, and that word is connectivity. Connectivity is the central theme. Now, transfer of technology has to do with digitalization. Digitalization is a prime requisite for the rapid development of the economies of all 7 countries. Now let me give you a few examples. Today, one of the main problems facing all our countries in this region is the mismatch between the content of education on the one hand and the availability of employment opportunity on the other. These are young populations. These are populations that have access to education. The education and health systems of Sri Lanka represent our inherent strength. In our own country, we have education which is free in the public education system right up to and including university. The quality of education is high. This is true not only of Sri Lanka, but of the BIMSTEC region generally. But more and more we are encountering a very inflammatory sociological problem. It is that people who are highly educated and who are looking for employment that is commensurate with their qualifications become increasingly conscious that the social system is unable to deliver even at the basic level to provide them with a means of livelihood to which they legitimately consider themselves entitled by virtue of the education that they have received. So there's a mismatch. This is not so in countries of East Asia and Southeast Asia. There, on the whole, it would be true to say that young people are trained for particular jobs in industry. The requirements are there, the requirements of the marketplace. And the function of the education system is to turn out products for whom jobs are waiting in the corporate sector. So in a sense, Lord Macaulay has a lot to answer for. Our system is elitist, nothing lacking in terms of quality, but there is this lack of compatibility between the demands of the marketplace and the nature of the education that is imparted. Now, in all BIMSTEC countries, certainly in Sri Lanka, we are making a resolute attempt to ensure a greater relevance of education, greater relevance, by adding to the curriculum subjects like information technology, computer technology, language proficiency, by which I mean not only proficiency in the English language, but in Korean, in Chinese, in Japanese, in all these languages. So, digitalization is important. What are the jobs that are available? And what is the type of training that is required to equip people to take those jobs and to perform satisfactorily? Also, the importance of vocational education. Then also, digitalization is important at the grassroots level. This morning, Sri Narendra Modi, in his virtual address, said that about 70% of the economies of all the BIMSTEC countries are basically agricultural. In our countries, certainly in my country, in Sri Lanka, successive governments have gallantly grappled with the problem of marketing. But it remains the regrettable reality today that the consumer in the cities pays approximately, in some cases, about seven times the farm gate price. What the farmer gets for his produce. What the farmer gets for his produce is X. What the consumer pays in Kandy or Colombo may be X into 7, as much as that. And the difference is accounted for by profits that are made by a series of unconscionable middlemen. I know when I came into politics many years ago, in 1994, the then government of President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, in successive budgets which I presented to Parliament on her behalf, I presented 7 budgets in a row on her behalf, and a persevering effort was made to deal with this problem. Since then, all governments that have ruled this country have had to get to grips with this problem. But the problem still remains. Now, digitalization is going to help the farmer to discover where he can get the best price for the commodity that he produces. Very important. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, in a very fascinating conversation that I had with her in Dhaka a couple of months ago, told me that at the height of COVID-19, she paid money into the bank accounts of farmers, but she did so electronically. She wanted to initiate the farmers at the grassroots level into technology. She also told me something very important, or very interesting, which I shared with both the President and the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. She said at the time she took over, there were no female vice-chancellors of universities, not one, she said. She appointed them. Some degree of resistance, but she had the fortitude and the courage to do that. Even more interesting, she told me, she gave scholarships on an extensive scale. But she saw to it that the scholarship was given not to the child, not to the father of the family, but to the mother. She gave the scholarship to the mother. Because she felt, and rightly so, because the empirical results have demonstrated the correctness of her assessment, she felt that the mother would manage the resources responsibly and efficiently. So it was a mother who was given the scholarship. She also said that she increased the salaries of public officials 100%. So people had disposable incomes. They had money to spend. The result was that Bangladeshi industry continued not only to function, but indeed to prosper during COVID-19. So production lines were open. There was no retrenchment. There were no problems with regard to employment. So what I'm telling you is that these comparative experiences within the BIMSTEC region are of the greatest value. Then on connectivity and digitalization, there's a strong push in some quarters for more free trade agreements to be entered into. At this moment, Sri Lanka has only 2 free trade agreements. One is with India, the other is with Pakistan. We are now embarking upon preliminary discussions to start with not free trade agreements, but preferential trade agreements. But for that, we have to take the chambers of commerce along. And in the near future, I will initiate discussions in collaboration with my colleague, the Minister of Trade, with the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, the National Chamber of Commerce, and the Federation of Chambers of Industry, of Commerce and Industry. With regard to free trade agreements, there is, to be candid, some degree of resistance by entrepreneurs in this country. You know, before I became foreign minister in 2010, I was foreign minister from 2010 to 2015. Just before that, I was minister for international trade. And in that capacity, I had to deal with a variety of problems arising from the implementation of free trade agreements. A recurring complaint was that in terms of the FTA, Sri Lanka is entitled to export a certain quantity, let us say, of tea or pepper or vanaspati, but in practice it does not happen. That is because of a series of what are called NTBs, non-tariff barriers, relating to the period, the quarter within which you can export the commodity, the requirement that is imposed on the importer in the foreign country to obtain a license before the commodities can be exported into that country, Sri Lankan certification of perishables like vegetables and fruits not being accepted by that country. Then tariffs and customs and so on, sometimes not only at the national level, but at state or provincial levels. So in combination, cumulatively, these were very significant impediments to the implementation of free trade agreements. So there was some degree of resistance. So these are problems that collectively the BIMSTEC countries will have to deal with. Then I return to my overarching theme. My overarching theme is connectivity. Multimodal transport. That was certainly a sharp focus in the deliberations that spanned the last 3 days. Multimodal transport. This is exceedingly important within the BIMSTEC region, multimodal transport. Access to the marketplace. It is important for controlling prices, introducing greater competition, and generating more employment. Connectivity of ports and harbors. Another very interesting thing that Sheikh Hasina told me was, she told me, why don't we develop greater integration and connectivity between the ports of Chittagong and Colombo? You know, the mainstay of the economy of both countries, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, is the apparel trade, garments, apparels. As you know, apparels have overtaken tea as a source of foreign exchange in Sri Lanka. And companies like Victoria's Secret source their garments from Sri Lankan companies like Brandix and MAS Holdings and so on. Now, Sri Lanka does not produce the yarn. We import the yarn. We add the labor component and we produce garments of very high quality for sophisticated markets in Western Europe and the United States of America. The yarn is produced in Bangladesh. So Sheikh Hasina very pragmatically asked me, why is Bangladesh shipping all this to ports in Malaysia and Singapore, then all the way through the Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea, and then into the Gulf and Western Europe? We will be able to save nautical miles, time and money if we make greater use of the port of Colombo, Hambantota or Colombo. So integration of ports and harbors. Sri Lanka is very focused on that. 70% of our container shipping is either to or from India. So it makes sense to collaborate more closely with India. Indeed, it makes sense. You know, we must overcome irrational prejudices. It makes good sense to have integration with the Indian economy in so many sectors. Now there are power cuts. Today there is a 10-hour power cut. Now Sri Lanka can produce only 3,400 megawatts of power. One Indian company, NTPC, produces daily 60,300 megawatts. We are eager to produce electricity from wind power in the Gulf of Mannar. Indian companies, including the Adani Group, are very much interested in coming here to invest in that field. Sri Lanka needs oil. Now we have all these problems with regard to diesel, petrol, particularly gas. Now if we had the storage capacity, there were 99 tank farms which were doing nothing in Trincomalee. Now we have sorted out that problem. 24 for Sri Lanka, 14 for the Indian Oil Corporation, and 61 out of the 61 remaining tanks, a joint venture in which Sri Lanka will have 51% and India will have 41%, a win-win situation. Now, we obviously have to access the world market for oil. Will it not make sense to access international markets through India rather than go on our own? Because India is the third largest consumer of oil in the modern world. So in all these sectors, take tourism. Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar, one of the longest beaches in the world. Thailand has achieved phenomenal success in their tourism industry. I told His Excellency, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister of Thailand, that one area in which Sri Lanka could very productively collaborate with Thailand is with regard to gems and jewelry. Sri Lanka is rich in these resources, the Sri Lankan sapphire, for example. In fact, we have almost all precious stones except emeralds and diamonds. But we need expertise in cutting, polishing, certification, laboratory testing. The Kingdom of Thailand is a world leader in those areas. So connectivity in that field is certainly beneficial for Sri Lanka. Then the Blue Ocean, the Colombo Declaration on Sustainable Nitrogen Management came in for very strong praise. At COP26, which was an initiative by Prime Minister Boris Johnson in Glasgow, His Excellency President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and I attended it. So the Blue Ocean, the conservation of marine resources, practical measures against overexploitation of our fisheries resources, biodiversity, our coral reefs, the prevention of bottom trawling, global warming, measures to be taken in the event of marine disasters like the Express Pearl disaster. Prime Minister Modi committed substantial resources to BIMSTEC for this purpose. So the ocean, for all our countries, the ocean is both a challenge and an opportunity. History, geography, culture are all intertwined in the oceans that surround us. So there then is a very promising field for collaboration. Now I will conclude with a few succinct remarks. If you're talking of connectivity, and if that endeavor is to be successful, it must not be narrowly circumscribed. You cannot think only of collaboration between governments, between the corridors of power. Important as it is not exclusive. There must be people-to-people connectivity. For example, we have such connectivity with Myanmar and Thailand. Thailand and Sri Lanka are repositories of Theravada Buddhism. Our pilgrims go to India and to Nepal, to Lumbini. Then connectivity among entrepreneurs, among business people, that is the engine of growth. And that is one of the central functions of BIMSTEC. Then I also think, look at BIMSTEC geographically. BIMSTEC is located between SAARC and ASEAN. And to my mind, there's immense opportunity there, enormous possibilities as a bridge, a conduit between SAARC and ASEAN. I don't know whether many of you are aware of that, but in the 60s, when Prime Minister Dudley Senanayake was ruling the country, there was some thought given to the possibility of Sri Lanka, or Ceylon as the country was then called, joining ASEAN. It was seriously considered, but abandoned for a variety of reasons. President Nathan of Singapore, he is no longer living, but I have met him and had some interesting conversations with him. He wrote his autobiography. And in that autobiography, there are some very interesting references to discussions that were carried on at that time by the then government of Ceylon with regard to joining ASEAN. For better, for worse, it did not happen. But BIMSTEC can today be availed of, as I say, as a connecting link between SAARC and ASEAN. Then finally, I would like to tell you that BIMSTEC is important from two perspectives. One would be specific projects. There are as many as 262 specific projects which are in the pipeline, which have been conceived of and are awaiting implementation in the 7 BIMSTEC countries. So those are projects. But apart from projects, BIMSTEC is also important for norms, normative principles. That is equally important. I spoke of the waters that surround us, the ocean, as both a challenge and an opportunity. We believe in common with many countries, including the United States, that Sri Lanka, indeed all our countries, are committed to a rules-based order governing the oceans. We are not a colossus on the world stage, but our country has played a pioneering role in the development of the body of law governing the oceans. UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. I don't know whether you are aware that one of our very distinguished diplomats, the late Hamilton Shirley Amarasinghe, who at that time was president of the United Nations General Assembly, was one of the architects of UNCLOS. And President Jimmy Carter valued his services so much that when the government changed in 1977, he addressed a personal request to President Jayawardena to keep Ambassador Amarasinghe in New York as our permanent representative to the United Nations so that he could continue his invaluable work in relation to UNCLOS. Unfortunately, that did not happen for reasons which are not relevant for our purpose. But Sri Lanka made a very active contribution to the development of the corpus of law governing the oceans. So we believe in a rules-based order applicable to the oceans. We believe in the right of free navigation through international waters. These, we think, are the building blocks of an international order that is based upon trade, investment, and prosperity. So these are, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, my thoughts on BIMSTEC, where we are. A lot has been accomplished. That was a result of teamwork. My own ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, from the Secretary downwards, worked indefatigably to achieve these results, and we derive justifiable satisfaction from what has been accomplished during the last few days. But there are miles to go before we can become complacent, and the success that is within our reach will be attained only if we continue to show the industry, the application, the commitment that has characterized and underpinned the organization of the 5th BIMSTEC conference. So I thank Dr. Laksiri Mendis for the invitation that he extended to me to share these thoughts with you on this occasion. I thank all of those who associated themselves selflessly and tirelessly with the efforts of my ministry and the Presidential Secretariat. I thank you very warmly, and I ask you to continue to join with us and to give us the benefit of your wisdom, your sagacity, and your experience to move this forward for the well-being of all 7 countries which comprise BIMSTEC. Thank you very much.
Next, we have some special remarks delivered by Mr. Reid Aishleman, Mission Director, Sri Lanka and the Maldives, USAID. Mr. Reid Aishleman is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service, and prior to beginning his current assignment as Mission Director of Sri Lanka and Maldives in March 2018, he served in Washington, D.C. as Deputy Assistant Administrator in the Asian Bureau and the Director of the Office of Energy and Infrastructure in the Bureau for Economic Growth, Education, and Environment. From 2011 to 2015, he also served as the Deputy Mission Director of USAID Philippines and Pacific Islands. He also practiced law through an appointment as Assistant Law Director for the city of Akron, Ohio, and private practice in Columbus, Ohio. While working as a private attorney, he also engaged in international legal consulting assignments in Southeast Asia and China, and he holds a master's degree in international affairs, Southeast Asian Studies from Ohio University, and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Akron School of Law. Mr. Aishleman.
Thank you. Honorable Minister Paris, Dr. Mendez, Professor Saj, distinguished guests, thank you so much for inviting me here to provide some brief remarks. It's truly a privilege to be here with this esteemed group of distinguished officials from across the Bay of Bengal, the whole region, convened here today for the 5th BIMSTEC Summit. Let me start by just saying that the U.S. commitment to an open, connected, prosperous, resilient, and secure Indo-Pacific region is strong, stronger than ever. Our recently launched Indo-Pacific strategy serves as a guide, we believe, to build collective capacity with allies, partners, regional institutions to ensure strong health and economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as promote security and good governance, and as the Honorable Minister talked about, the corpus of law, rule of law throughout the region. We look forward to working with all of our partner economies to harness rapid technological transformation, including the digital economy, and adapt to the coming energy and climate transition throughout the region. Consistent with this vision for the Indo-Pacific region, the United States stands ready to partner with BIMSTEC and pursue shared goals of fostering a more prosperous and stable South Asia. We also recognize, of course, the importance of building these connections between South and Southeast Asia through avenues of trade and cooperation that link not only governments, but businesses, civil society as well. As has been mentioned by the Honorable Minister, cooperation that links business, civil society, and governments is important, and BIMSTEC can play a leading role in strengthening regional integration across Asia. As Dr. Mendez, I believe, said, with 22% of the world's population, a combined GDP of nearly 2.7 trillion US dollars, BIMSTEC countries are already the economic powerhouses. Increasing cross-border cooperation will promote economic development. It will build a secure and inclusive digital economy, and it will enhance stability in the region. The United States is proud to partner with BIMSTEC countries to help foster this increased regional cooperation. An active and well-resourced BIMSTEC, we believe, will allow better access to rising consumer markets. It will help overcome geographical obstacles to trade. and it will help member states adhere to international best practices. So that is why, through the U.S. government's cross-border infrastructure and connectivity project, we are helping to support and build the capacity of BIMSTEC member states to more effectively lead and cooperate on trade, infrastructure, the digital economy, as well as cross-border connectivity. I understand that the roundtable dialogue tomorrow will be another opportunity to continue that discussion as BIMSTEC implements the charter endorsed at today's summit. So we very much look forward to working with BIMSTEC to pursue our shared goals of fostering a more prosperous and stable South Asia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ashleman. Next, we have 4 short presentations that will serve as a brief recap of the summit, charter, and orientation of the panel discussion. May I first invite Dr. Salim Raihan, Executive Director, SANEM of Bangladesh, to come up and deliver his presentation.
Good afternoon to all of you. I think it's my privilege to speak in front of this audience, and also I think there are many from South Asia and Southeast Asia. They are also connected through Zoom. So this conference, what we have actually started, is the inauguration program today. It is on enhancing BIMSTEC connectivity in the new era. And actually, our Honorable Minister of Sri Lanka, Foreign Minister, and the keynote speaker today, he emphasized quite a lot on this connectivity issue. And when we talk about connectivity, we mean trade connectivity, investment connectivity. We talk about physical infrastructure, social infrastructure. Definitely, he emphasized quite a lot on these issues. And also, he emphasized quite a lot on the people-to-people connectivity. I think our conference, which we'll have tomorrow, a day-long program on 6 sessions. The first one will be talking we'll be discussing on the trade and investment, and then on infrastructure, multimodal connectivity, digital economy, BIMSTEC charter, BIMSTEC fund institution, people-to-people contracts. But I think the one unique session we have actually left towards the end, which is the way forward 2047 and 50 years of BIMSTEC. I think we need to actually look beyond the now 25 years of BIMSTEC and think about the future as well. From SANEM, I really very much welcome you all to this conference. We are co-partnering with LKI and USAID. And I have my co-partner also, Dr. Nihal Pitigala. We are jointly actually conducting a year-long training program for BIMSTEC countries, funded by or supported by USAID. So we are grateful for this support. But we are almost halfway through this capacity building program, and we have also we are also coming up with a list of analytical papers on a very innovative and some of the new issues, emerging issues, which are coming up, especially with respect to the FTAs, especially with respect to the connectivity, what Honorable Minister he emphasized, digital economy and people-to-people contracts, as well as some of the very important issues related to trade facilitation. So we know that the prospects of trade and investment integration in the Bay of Bengal region, it is well documented in various literature, empirical literature. But I think, and many of the studies, they have already mentioned that the interregional trade can go up by a few times if the proper trade agreements are in place, especially we're talking about FTAs, and also if the trade facilitation and different other trade facilitation measures and connectivity are in place. But despite that, we know that we have a lot of aspirations, but the achievements so far have not been that great, but we are very, very hopeful, and actually I was part of this historical moment this morning when this BIMSTEC charter was signed and 3 important MOUs were signed. I think it's a very, very bold step towards having an integrated Bay of Bengal region. As well as, while I was listening to the honorable head of the states and the governments, most of them, I think all of them expressed their strong political will to carry this regional integration agenda forward. I think it's a very high time now to translate this political will into a reality. I think to translate this political into reality, we need the kind of cooperation from all the member states, the BIMSTEC Secretariat, and we are also here as the academic, as the kind of practitioners to support the BIMSTEC Secretariat as well as the member states to build the capacity and in other areas too. So I will just stop here by saying I will again welcome you all for tomorrow's very day-long session, and Dr. Nihal Pitigala, he will also elaborate after me on that too, on some of these very important issues we'll be discussing. We will be actually hosting in those 6 sessions very renowned panelists from this region. Many of them will be joining in person, and many of them will be joining virtually. So I welcome all of you and those who have also joined virtually to this program, to this inaugural session, and I'm quite sure that you will also be joining tomorrow's session. So please be connected. We are talking about connectivity. The connectivity with amongst us will also require that we pose the right kind of questions and we actually discuss on the right kind of issues. One great philosopher once told that, if you can pose the right question, you are actually very close to getting the answer. Thank you very much.
Next, may I invite Dr. Nihal Pitigala, lead economist, WBD and InReach Global, for him to give his remarks.
Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, Salim, thank you very much for that introduction. Both Dr. Mendes and Professor Pires made my speech much easier, simply by highlighting why BIMSTEC is such an important entity. What I wanted to highlight, both what Dr. Mendes and Professor Pires mentioned, is a lot of these nuances about this region hovers around the similarities, the gravity, the culture, the proximity of the region historically. And what has happened in the recent past is that trade and exchanges have moved along despite the frictions that the region has between the countries. So that's one of the things I wanted to highlight. In tomorrow's discussions, we will get much more deeper into some of the specific areas where the panelists will elaborate and entertain questions and explore answers. So it's going to be a very open discussion tomorrow. And we'll encourage even those who are present, those who are virtually present, I think 50 plus across 7 countries will actively participate in tomorrow's discussion. Just to go to a little bit of fundamentals to highlight where we are. We are just emerging from a global pandemic, which has sort of lead the health crisis into precipitated into an economic crisis, what I call an economic contagion that has resulted in like a collapse of global demand and supply. And this is the first time in recent crisis that this has happened simultaneously, that has spared no country in the world. And on top of that, it has obviously resulted in collapse of our exports, remittances, the tourism earnings, and Thailand, for example, who are dependent on tourism, is also severely affected. But as we move forward, this is where it becomes very necessary to discuss the relevance of BIMSTEC. As I mentioned to you, the gravity and the economic proximity within the region, and one of the things is that as you move forward, to look for areas that you can collaborate. Now, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, we have on top of the crisis, nagging debt crisis and debt solvency crisis due to debt servicing obligations as well as the current account deficits that has dwindled foreign exchange. So that brings us to a question of the need to sort of think of import demand as well as the export supply, which has sort of spread the gap over the recent years. And that brings us to BIMSTEC, the relevance of BIMSTEC. Now, there is a tendency that we have been sort of discussing with my colleagues that recently, because of the global pandemic, there has been a tendency to regionalize, to reshore for supply chains, and that's where BIMSTEC even become more relevant. So as far as if you think of exports, and that's one way you can start thinking of BIMSTEC. And in tomorrow's discussion, we'll explore most of these topics in a little more depth. I'll thank you once again for the opportunity, and we look forward to having a vibrant discussion tomorrow. And please feel free not to hesitate to ask questions to probe the panelists. And I thank you very much for this opportunity. Thanks.
Next, we have Dr. Prabir Dey, Research and Information Systems for Developing Countries, India.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the invitation. First of all, grateful to LKI and SANEM for organizing this dialogue and today's curtain raiser for tomorrow's whole day brainstorming on the next agenda for the Bay of Bengal cooperations. So, Honorable Minister, Professor Paris, and then USAID Country Director, LKI Executive Director, all diplomatic corps who have gathered here, and the dignitaries on the dais. You must have noticed that there is a very good momentum has been added politically on the BIMSTEC process, and I think I personally went into some of the speeches by the head of states, particularly Prime Minister Modi, and I think this summit is a very productive. And 2016, Ambassador Sumit Nakandala, who's the former Secretary General, is here, that he took the initiative to call Out of the Turn summit in Goa. So if it is the turning point for the BIMSTEC cooperation is 2016 onward, and two years after 2016, we had fourth summit in Kathmandu. And if you compare the outcomes, and you will see that the achievements are not really bad. It takes time to negotiate multilateral agreements. It takes time to negotiate plurilateral things. But I think in the Bay of Bengal is the place where there are common challenges, particularly in the COVID time. And the leaders, they took right decisions to come out with concerted effort to address those challenges. So fifth summit has given an adequate, relatively speaking, adequate political and policy directions. That's what I found. And 3 agreements signed for the charter, master plan connectivity, and several other things. And those were actually initiated when Ambassador Sumit Nakandala was the first Secretary General, so he can tell us more details about it. But it took almost about 7 and 8 years to negotiate and put them in order. As you know, the charter has talked about the summit should take place now once in 2 years. I think, if you follow with APEC or ASEAN, the leaders, they don't miss the summit. The summit is absolutely very required, to give a political direction. That's what's happening in the Bay of Bengal. Plus, the trade investment, connectivity, or other important sectors are also taken up. I think what we should do from tomorrow onward, the 1st April, the chairmanship moves from Sri Lanka to Thailand. The 2 original founders of the Subarnabhumi initiative, which was in 1996, initiated with a Thai generous support, that we should start working for the next summit, on the 6th summit from the 1st April. And I'm sure our good friend, Mr. Vacharas, with us, he was the former executive director of Mekong Institute and intergovernmental organizations. And the scholars like Dr. Ganeshan Vignaraja, who is also with us, with taking all their support, we would be having a right journey on the time for next year. Now, I conclude, by saying that what we have achieved in these today's summit statements and the speeches, I think there are enough scope to work on the trade investment. Everyone said that to conclude FTA, I think 23rd round of trade negotiating committee is completed. The number may go up, but there is good progress on the rules of origin in just a few months back. And I think it is possible to conclude quickly, provided that we narrow down our services trade relations, services trade negotiations, disputes. Then on the connectivity, master plan identified $137 billion worth projects over 46. So can we take up some of them? But the region certainly need external funding, Look at the great example, if I say that it is an AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, has actually played a major role in taking up many connectivity projects. So BIMSTEC may be looking at, that could be in areas. The one-third one, which also all the leaders have felt, and USAID, I'm sure, they will be doing the back of the envelope calculation and the working on the maritime cooperation, the Indo-Pacific. Well, Nepal, Bhutan are having many mountain economy issues, so perhaps those also need to be looked after very, very carefully and properly. Indian Prime Minister has offered $1 million for Secretariat, $3 million for disaster risk relief things, setting up an EPG, eminent person group for the BIMSTEC. And these are the quite good, appropriate steps. I think other members also to follow same direction, or maybe better directions, whatever you term it in the way. India has set up a Bay of Bengal center already in Nalanda University, by the way. Perhaps we need to have more interaction with them. Way forward. I'm not going to give an agenda for the next 5th summit. What I see, just to start discussion, that this is just a beginning, that's signing charter, master plan connectivity things, and other MOUs for criminal matters, etc., etc. But what our good friend Dr. Nihal Pitigala has been telling us, please do more training capacity building. India as a country can take care, but other 6 members, they need very strong support. So this project that SANEM and LKI, they have done it, and they're doing it excellent. So I think this should continue. And agreement, those who are being negotiated, coastal shipping agreement, motor vehicle agreement, others, those need to be concluded very fast. Otherwise, we will fall behind many other regional blocks. There could be opportunities, I think we should have more discussions tomorrow, that cooperation with ASEAN, SAARC, and other multilateral bodies, those need to be executive director, LKI, he talked about the plurilaterals, very nice, suggestions. Training capacity building, today is the 25 years. And in the 25 years, I can only tell that it is Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, who had a 3 times visit to this beautiful island, And I think it is 100 years, if I may be corrected, his first visit to this, when he visited the national anthem was written by Ananda Samarakun, who actually studied in Vishwabharati. So he is the only person, when I visited Chulalongkorn University, or in Bangladesh, or in India, or Nepal, Bhutan, and Myanmar. Rabindranath Tagore visited, he had a maiden call on voyage to Indonesia and Southeast Asia. I think all were looking in the directions and look east. So 25 years from now, when India will be celebrating 700 years of its independence, and we'll having 50 years of BIMSTEC, I think we'll be more integrated, but there will be many challenges on climate change issues on the social sectors. We really haven't given much thought about it. And some of the writings of the Tagore are actually having many directions. Bridge building, his first visit to Sri Lanka is actually, if you look at the literature written by his intellectual lieutenant general, Professor Kalidas Nag, he talked about bridge building after his first visit. Third visit, he played a drama called Sap Mochon in Bengali, And Dr. Salim, we can have a more discussion sometime. So these are huge implications having on the cultural front. I'm sure BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal countries will pick up more such discussion, and tomorrow we'll have an opportunity. So thank you very much for giving me an opportunity. This document also shared with you. This is an humble attempt from the network that we have set up, and with the guidance of Ambassador Sumit and many others joining with Bay of Bengal Economic Dialogue 2022. So please look at it, our joint effort. So this kind of networking interactions are very required in terms of coming together and working for all. Thank you very much.
Next, may I invite Dr. Vachras Leelawat, Honorary Advisor, Bollinger and Company, Thailand.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. So first of all, I would like to thank LKI, SANEM, and the USAID for inviting me to this important event. It's a good opportunity for me to reconnect with my long-lost friend for many years. Yeah, and I would like to congratulate the Sri Lankan government for successfully conclude the fifth summit, BIMSTEC summit, and successfully conclude the chairmanship of BIMSTEC for 3 years since 2019, and we see a lot of progress during these 3 years, and we see it's good as Salim mentioned that we witnessed the historical moment of BIMSTEC today, and we see happy that to see the charter, BIMSTEC charter has been signed, and also another important document is the master plan for the transport connectivity. For the BIMSTEC charter, of course, it set up the rule-based order for 7 member countries, and it will be the good mechanism for make BIMSTEC very active and more active as before, because within these 25 years we see the good time and bad time. Sometimes at the beginning it's moved very fast and then it slowed down for a bit, and then recently it become it's moved again, and we want to see the movement and the progress in the same pace, or at least the same pace, or the faster pace, as we've seen within these 3 years. For the document on the master plan for transport connectivity, of course, we have a lot of 200 projects in the pipeline, and with the support from the development partner like USAID and the government of 7 member states, we can turn the paper, the dream, into reality. So the need for the gap analysis for each member countries on the connectivity should be done, and also the capacity building activity should be implemented to strengthen the connectivity in the BIMSTEC region. When we talk about the connectivity, I will talk more tomorrow on the digital connectivity, physical connectivity, and regulatory connectivity. So physical connectivity is important. Yeah, it's a must. It's a foundation for everything. Yeah, and for the regulatory connectivity, we can set the rule to facilitate the movement of goods and services among the countries in the BIMSTEC region. As you know, that every country is, and when we talk about the custom at the custom point, there's a lot of stuck of the trucks, and this is the common problem in every country. So the involvement of the local government and local business people is, I would like to encourage the involvement of the local people, because different locations have the different problem. So, and the gap analysis should be done to solve this kind of problem. So we want to see the free flow of goods and service within the BIMSTEC. I'm glad to hear that the BIMSTEC, the Secretary General of BIMSTEC Secretariat mentioned about the progress of the FTA, BIMSTEC FTA. It's been a while, yeah, and we will see the BIMSTEC agreement on trade in goods will happen soon, according to the speech from the Secretary General. So at the moment, Thailand have 14 FTA with 18 countries, and recent, the newest one that just entered into force is RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And if we have BIMSTEC FTA, we will have the 15 FTA with 18 countries. So this is the way to connect Southeast Asia and the South Asia together. Hopefully, it will the FTA will be concluded very soon. Last point that I want to make is on the Thailand chairmanship of the BIMSTEC. I would like to congratulate the Thai government and the Thai people. Actually, congratulate myself as well to for Thailand to be the chair of BIMSTEC, to assume the chair of BIMSTEC after Sri Lanka. As my Prime Minister mentioned that Thailand will play the role to connect ASEAN and SAARC, connect the Southeast Asia and South Asia together. We're talking about BIMSTEC with the 1,500 million people, which is 22% of the world population. We add another 500 from the other 8 ASEAN member countries. So we will have like 2 billion population, which is about close to 30% of the world population. Is quite big. So with this kind of role, it will have the mutual benefit, both BIMSTEC and ASEAN. The issues that the agenda that the Thai government will push forward is on the BCG, the bio-circular green economy. And listening to the statement, the speech from the head of the state, it seemed like every single country embraced the issues of the bio and circular and green economy, even though that didn't spell out exactly about the BCG or bio-circular economy, but with the gist of the speech from all the head of member state, it seemed that they embraced with the BCG. I am quite sure that with the strong commitment and the solidarity of the 7 member states, BIMSTEC will progress at the accelerated pace, and we will see tangible, sustainable impact of the from our collective efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a brief period for questions and for discussion. May I invite Dr. Salim Rahan to moderate this
Thank you very much. I'm just checking how much time we may have for the question and answer session. Around 15 minutes. So the floor is open. So we'd look forward to your comments or questions. Would like to go first, and then we'll also take some comments and questions from the Zoom, those who have been connected. So anyone want to start? Dr. Ganeshan, would you like to? Please.
Very much. I wonder if you could tell us why you think an FTA is so critical in the context of the BIMSTEC architecture, because there's a lot of skepticism amongst business as to whether large countries will benefit and small countries will lose. And I wonder if you could tell us why this is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganeshan. Actually, I'm not the only person who would be answering, so I wish our Honorable Minister he was here. So he could have actually answered them. But definitely, I may respond, and my other fellow panelists can also. But from my perspective, from my understanding, I think very quickly on that, since this was also mentioned by Honorable Minister, that if there are some kind of small country fear, and Bangladesh is no exception in that, and Sri Lanka also probably. But I think FTA is a kind of, can work as a kind of foundation for greater integration, the kind of it builds the confidence among the countries, because trade is the fundamental means for integration. Without trade and without investment, we can definitely look for other venues, but definitely trade should be the stepping stone. And in the FTA, definitely, I think that there are size imbalance in BIMSTEC. Also, there are least developed countries. Some of the least developed countries, they are graduating out. Some of the countries, they are also having some problems. I think those things need to be considered in the FTA negotiation. So I think it's not something hard and fast that we have to follow some rule. The BIMSTEC countries, they should find their own ways how to negotiate the FTAs. But I think FTA should be the stepping stone. But I just look forward to any other fellow panelists should all, if they want to reflect on that. Yes, please.
FTA is the starting point, because without an FTA, but what Dr. Vignaraja said is true, the bigger countries will benefit from it. But there should be a legal mechanism to bring them to a certain standard. No? Now, if you take Nigeria in the ECOWAS, it's a huge country. But there are small countries around, there's free trade in goods and services. But if there's a dispute, there's an arbiter who is fair by the big country as well as the small country. Same applies in the Caribbean community. So you must have a leveler. Without a leveler, the large countries will gobble the small countries. So there's some truth in it, but I didn't see anything in the Charter which provides for a mechanism or modality to bring this harmony with the legal institutional structure of a tribunal or a court. But when you say you are going to resolve these problems by discussion, negotiation and consensus, probably the bigger countries will have their say in the matter. So unless you have a court or an arbitral tribunal, you will not be able to, the bigger countries will win the day every time. That is how I would look at it. And I've seen many times in the ECOWAS, and I've been in that region for some time, when it was initially mooted. And I also worked in the Caribbean Community Secretariat. And we have gone to courts many times on behalf of the small countries. As opposed to the bigger countries, Caribbean Court intervened, and we have written submissions provide as an amicus curiae of the court. So we have to have a very strong secretariat, legally equipped to bring harmony and equality to the states. That is how it works in those countries. And I think you have to look beyond the region to find solutions in this matter.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind comments. Would you like to, sir, share your views?
I want to thank you as the director for organizing this event at LKI. My question is directed to Dr. Nihal Pittigala. I was very pleased that he's conducted a number of trainings, because as a World Bank economist specializing in trade, I thought the training modules that you have done is very appropriate. If you could elaborate for the benefit of the audience, that would be very good.
Thank you. Nihal, would you like to go now? And then after that, we will come to Ambassador Sumit Nakandara. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Gunaratna. I also wish to thank overwhelmingly the USAID openness to sort of do this. Let me say that this training that we are conducting is, I could say, it's once in a lifetime. Most of the training programs conducted by international institutions, including the World Bank and the WTO, generally restricted to a few weeks of training of a specific area. Instead of what we decided is actually USAID supported, is a more comprehensive approach across the 7 countries in a number of themes. These themes range from the basic understanding of trade, how trade policy is made, how infrastructure connectivity is, what are the interests and options, as well as modeling trade, modeling connectivity, what are the tools, what are the methods. We have so far completed training programs covering over 250 officials across the 7 countries. And this is just between October last year and March this year. And we have divided it to several segments, and which also includes a training program on negotiation skills. All that those modules have been divided sequentially in a way that eventually the recipients, the policymakers, the think tanks, the academics can sort of formulate well-positioned positions, articulate and advocate for the BIMSTEC moving forward. I hope that is sufficient, Professor Kutra.
Thank you very much. I would request Ambassador Sumit Nakandala to share your views, and you have seen the kind of progress, and also you are part of this success too so far. And after that, may I request my friends from LKI? I think Dr. Orpita Mukherjee, she's connected on Zoom, and if she's available, we'll try to listen to her after that. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Salim. I don't know what to say to begin. More than anybody else, I think I am very happy and pleased to see that finally the BIMSTEC Charter was signed today at the 5th BIMSTEC Summit, because we started the whole process. I have I just glanced through the Charter, and I found many of our inputs are there. I think there is I listened to very carefully and attentively what Dr. Mendis said. The BIMSTEC is not a secretariat-driven organization. BIMSTEC is a member-driven organization. And what we try to do, in fact, if you see some of the documentation, basically the nature of documentation of the secretariat, we thought to bring a hybrid like UNESCAP. And then UNESCAP is a secretariat-driven organization, but BIMSTEC was not like that. So we thought of having a kind of a hybrid. But I think we will talk tomorrow in detail, and I'll share some of the experiences and then where we will be going, looking at 47, 50 years. I think Salim and especially Prabir and the friends of Bay of Bengal, they know very well my views on that, and from the historical perspective, and we know very well from 1300 AD to 1500 AD, the entire Bay of Bengal was integrated with several trade networks. So it is not a new thing that we will certainly achieve that integration. Whether we will do through FTAs or trade facilitation or connectivity, we will have to wait and see. And but I think there is the very strong historical antecedent in bringing the Bay of Bengal together. It is not just 7 countries, but I think there are a number of other things. Those who would like to know about Bay of Bengal, I think my only recommendation is my good friend Sunil Amrit's book, Crossing Bay of Bengal. I would strongly recommend everybody to read, which will provide a great deal of idea. But let us continue this dialogue tomorrow. Thank you, Salim.
Thank you, Ambassador Nakandala. I'm checking with my friends. Is Dr. Urpita Mukherjee connected over Zoom? If she wants to talk, because I got the message that probably she wants to talk. Professor Urpita Mukherjee is from ICRIER, New Delhi. No? Okay. Or if there anything you have for me from the Zoom chat box? Okay. So if you can, these are on my screen? Okay. So, but before that, I would also like to check with the audience if anyone also wants to reflect on anything you would like to, sir? Okay. Okay, then let me read some of the, I think I've got some points probably from the chat box. We will not probably have time to discuss, because I think what Dr. Ganeshan, the question he asked, that requires a lot of discussion, and we have got a specific session on that, trade and investment, on this FTA. So definitely we'll take these questions forward for tomorrow. But the questions from the chat box, what you have found, what are you suggesting and thinking for introducing new economics in the current capitalism approach? What are the 3 agreements MOU signed during the 5th summit? When can you expect the trade in goods to conclude? I think this is talking about the FTA. Taking into account all problems raised after COVID-19 pandemic, such as supply chain disruption and raised another disruption due to the Russia war, Ukraine-Russia war, would we think about BIMSTEC as a way to increase the regional connectivity for mitigating the supply chain disruption among the BIMSTEC countries? I think that was a very, very valid and important question, and probably Honorable Minister, keynote speaker, he also emphasized on that, taking into account the current situation, how the regional integration can actually tap on the regional value chain or regional supply chain. What is the remedy and how do they rescue the people who are still left?
Secretariat-driven organization, but is a member-driven organization, right? I do concede that point. But what I'm saying is, honestly, you have a provision in that new charter that the Secretariat will negotiate treaties with other states as well as non-governmental organizations as well as with other regional organizations. So is it the members who are going to negotiate, or is the Secretariat? Because I lived in Porto, Spain for a long time, and I saw the CARICOM Secretariat, which had a legal branch, negotiating the EU CARICOM partnership agreement, which is a huge connection between the CARICOM and the EU. And it was the Secretariat driven, because it is the Secretariat representing the member states, got so much benefits. Of course, we hired none other than Sir Sridat Ramphal, who was the former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, to be our negotiating chief. And he turned the agreement in the negotiating process from a trade agreement to a development agreement, so that CARICOM got more benefits. The CARICOM states, member states, got more benefits by entrusting to the Secretariat. If the member states were involved, they would have never got that kind of benefits from the EU. Of course, after the Lomé and after that, these ACP countries had a chance to get together. So this is why I'm saying, if you have that section there, it must be given some meaning. And if the members are still involved, there's no need for that section in the new charter. So there will be a lot of problems, and these have to be resolved in due course by reference to some arbitrator or some court. I don't know how it is going to be member-driven, because you have established a secretariat now with certain powers and functions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for your very, very useful comments. One thing, what I understand is that the charter probably may not elaborate many of the things. It's just it creates the kind of foundation. But when, for example, in different areas of negotiation, definitely, as you rightly said, that how do you resolve the disputes? Those kind of things need to be built in. For example, we had this SARC dispute settlement or the SAFTA, under SAFTA, but it was never practiced. Probably Dr. Probit can also mention that. But one thing, what is needed is that what we have heard today, especially Prime Minister Narendra Modi's commitment of India's commitment of $1 million, and also we have heard Bangladesh's Prime Minister, she spoke very strongly about hosting the BIMSTEC Secretariat and helping BIMSTEC Secretariat to the maximum. I think we should exploit this opportunity. And now I just want to add one agenda of tentative agenda of what Dr. Probit he introduced for the 6th summit, that we should also create some roadmaps for how to enhance the capacity, or what would be the institutional development for a BIMSTEC Secretariat. We have the resources, but what is the roadmap? I think their practitioners like us would really like to contribute for the next 2 years or so. So I think with this, because of the time, and we have already exceeded time, I think it's a very high time now to get our honorable speaker for the concluding remarks. So please, I think over to you. Thank you.
So next we will have Professor Saj Mendes to give the concluding remarks. He is an additional secretary at the State Ministry of Regional Cooperation. He has a PhD from IIT Delhi, and he was also a former ambassador to Bahrain and South Korea as well.
Due to time constraints, I was contemplating how to summarize or to make the concluding remarks. Madam Kadragama and, of course, Excellency Ambassador, congratulations of being the new chair of the BIMSTEC, and, of course, Excellency, my Foreign Minister, and all other excellencies. Let me just state with just 6 factors what are the Sri Lanka's economic pivots at this juncture. As most of us know, the number 1 is FDI, that's investments. Number 2, to enhance exports. Number 3, to woo and attract tourism. Number 4, foreign remittances, that's the migrant workers from Middle East and other countries. Number 5, education, to have marketable, skilled education. And number 6, very importantly, to enhance the image and the profile of the country. Now, ladies and gentlemen and excellencies, BIMSTEC Summit, it's an iconic day, it's a momentous day that BIMSTEC Charter was signed, as the former Secretary General also stated, and Excellency, you stated. It was signed after many years of negotiations, so this is a day of celebration. So BIMSTEC, as a matter of fact, fulfills 5 of these these economic pivots or economic requirements of Sri Lankan government that mean accept foreign remittances, investments, exports, tourism, education, and to enhance the image of the country. Let me just state about, whenever I give speeches, some people ask, like, what do you mean by enhance the image of the country? In any country has an image. I recollect vividly, sir, what state are you from, sir, in the US? Sure. I was going to high school in Los Angeles, LA. High school, junior high school, and high school. I remember at that time people used to ask, this is in late 80s, people used to ask, where are you from? I said, from Sri Lanka. Then the next question, where is Sri Lanka? They used to ask, oh, it's next to India. Oh, India. I'm not insinuating any disparaging statements for any country. Used to state that, oh, India, it's a country of poverty, diseases, sicknesses, elephants, Kama Sutra, and sicknesses, and do they have food to eat? That was just about, I'm not talking about 50, 100 years ago. This is just about 30, 35 years, about 32, 33 years ago. Today, when you say India, what they say, I go to East Coast quite often, to Boston. Today, when you say India, what they say, oh my God, it's a country of immense economic opportunities and commercial vistas. This is a country which has the biggest export product. Trust me, I remember when I was in South Korea and in Bahrain, the Indian embassy used to say their biggest export product is something that most people just don't know. The biggest export product is CEOs. Today, the Google, Microsoft, MasterCard, IBM, all are run by Indian CEOs who have been raised and born in India, and they have gone for the master's and postgraduate degrees. And they run these huge behemoths, economic behemoths. Apple, there are 3 or 4 companies having a GDP, a market capitalization of over $1 trillion, with Apple about $3.1, $3.2 trillion. Mind you, this is a figure which is the GDP of India, or bigger than the GDP of the UK. Now, as you said, as previous speaker stated, the BIMSTEC total GDP of the 7 countries, it's about $4.3 trillion US dollars. Or if it's on purchasing power parity, you're talking about 15.5 trillion US dollars. This is a very, very large amount. But now, now, as Excellency, the Minister stated, we had 3 days of deliberation and discussions on BIMSTEC. Now, how do we translate these into tangible, concrete action? Now, intra-regional trade and connectivity would be extremely important. Now, connectivity, when you talk about connectivity, it's digitalization, regionalism, globalization, tourism, and, of course, multinational corporations and businesses. That creates a sense of connectivity. And let me just touch upon FTAs, since, sir, of course, I could address you, sir. After a long time, I'm seeing Dr. Mendes. As you stated about FTAs, I remember in 1998 when I was in when I was in Geneva, FTA was signed on 28th of December 1998. At that time, there were a lot of apprehension and angst amongst the people what the FTA might do to Sri Lanka. This was one of the iconic and success stories of any FTA that Sri Lanka has signed. Of course, Sri Lanka signed just about 2 FTAs, whereas I think India signed about nearly 30 FTAs, and Thailand has signed about 16 FTAs with about 20 countries. FTAs will basically enhance, boost, and aggrandize bilateral trade. Now, let me state about when you talk about trade. The global trade today is about 29 trillion or 30 trillion US dollars. I'm sure you might be knowing USAID when you run a company which is about, when you're running USAID, the biggest bilateral donor, having an annual budget close to $30 billion, which is almost the GDP of Nepal. That said, $29 trillion, and the GDP of the whole entire world is about $88 trillion. And US has, for the last 30 years, US has been maintaining 25% of the GDP. That's about 24 trillion US dollars. But the GDP of the entire BIMSTEC, the countries, have been basically just about, it comes to about less than 5%, the total GDP. We need to do a lot more, because if you look at Sri Lanka, intra-regional trade, in SAARC context, it has not succeeded as we expected when we formed the SAARC, the 7-member SAARC at that time, but now it's 8 members in 1985, 37 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen and excellencies, in 1977, when Sri Lanka opened up the economy, liberalized the economy, Sri Lanka's bilateral trade was $700 million. Today, Sri Lanka's bilateral trade, exports and imports, it's about $32 billion. That means, in other words, for the last 45 years, Sri Lanka's bilateral trade has enhanced or increased or boosted by only 45 times. Only 45 times. Let me just make a comparison. In South Korean Republic of Korea, in 1970, their exports, I'm saying only exports was $835 million with an M. In 2019, less than 5 decades later, it was $635 billion. That means the bilateral trade exports had increased by 750 times, or 75,000%. In the recorded history, no country has achieved this feat of increasing exports by 750 times in less than 5 decades. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just touch upon equity markets, because this is also something else which any country can be developed and advanced and augment their economies by attracting foreign direct investments to the capital market, debt market, and to the equity market. Now, U.S. equity market is, as a matter of fact, with a $23-24 trillion economy, having an equity market, a market capitalization of approximately $47 trillion, about twice of that GDP. Sri Lanka, now, today the market had a bad day. Market went down. Now, India, I recollect vividly when I went to Delhi first in 2002, it's 20 years ago, the market cap of India, Bombay Stock Exchange and the other exchanges, was just about $100 billion. Today, the market cap is higher, greater than the entire GDP. It's about $3.3 trillion. That means it has gone up by 33 times within the space of just 2 decades. Ladies and gentlemen, the message that I want to state is that regional trade, digitalization, tourism, and of course investments, they would make not a single country, but all 7 countries of the BIMSTEC richer. I remember Madam Kadragama, I remember Excellency late Minister Lakshman Kadragama used to say that 7 sisters of SAARC, and he was saying probably about 20 years ago, in 2002, 2003, at one of the memorial speeches. But if the 7 countries got together, inter-regional trade would have been not 5.2%, would have been at least about 15-20%. Now, whenever we talk about regional organizations, regionalism, we have just like 5 organizations come to your mind. Would be EU, NAFTA, ASEAN, Mercosur, and GCC. And these have basically worked toward one objective of trade, inter-regional trade. India, when you look at the largest company of India, it's obviously Reliance, which is about $240 billion US. Still, it's a mid-sized company of any company in Silicon Valley, or just about 1/3 the size of Facebook. Ladies and gentlemen, the objective, Excellency, should be, now your country, sir, Thailand, having a GDP of $586 billion, but you have trade, bilateral trade of $465 billion. That's about 75% bilateral trade. Whereas Sri Lanka, having a GDP of $83 billion, and the bilateral trade is just about 1/3, about $32 billion. I know it's been a long day, but I'll end up with one statement. I know Dr. Vignaraja is also here. 18th century, Benjamin Franklin stated, no country has ever been ruined by trade. Trade will lift almost everybody else, all stakeholders. Wish all of you the very best.
This concludes the proceedings of the inaugural session of this conference. We will have a diverse range of panel discussions scheduled for day 2 of this conference. And the topics of the sessions include infrastructure and multimodal connectivity, the digital economy, BIMSTEC Charter, BIMSTEC Fund and Institution, and people-to-people contacts. Please do join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. Colombo time for the second day of this summit. Thank you and have a pleasant evening.